Chapter 8. The House of Sickness. A pleasant-faced nurse stood by Kondima's high white bed. "Doctor, come and see the little girl from the Borneo mountains," she called to a tall white man with a white coat and yellow hair. He stepped to her side. "So this is the child." He twisted his mustache. "Looks a little thin, nurse. Give her lots of milk and anything else that will fatten her up a little." "The eye looks terrible, doesn't it?" The nurse tipped Kondima's head back so the doctor could see. It does, but we will fix that." The doctor reached in his pocket, took out a lollipop, and slipped it into Kondima's open mouth. She had listened to the conversation and heard every word, but the candy spoke a language she could understand better. The doctor spoke to the nurse in English. "Ah, what a smile this little one has." He hurried off between the rows of beds. Now Kondima had her first look at the house of sickness. The beds in the long room stood in 2 rows, and in every bed she could see a sick child. Few of them could sit up as she could. Some had white cloth bound around their legs or arms. In the bed next to Kondima lay a little black child, so thin that even her bones seemed to have shrunk, and Kondima never looked at her without thinking of a spider. On the other side, the white walls rose high and close, for she had the very last bed in the row. Nurse looked kindly at the new patient. "You will be here for several weeks, child," she said in Malay. "We will try to help you all we can, and you must help us by doing just as the doctor says, so that you may get well soon." Kondima understood. She nodded her head and smiled again. When a jolly Chinese boy brought Kondima's noon meal, she stared in surprise at the tray. The boy jabbered talk that she couldn't understand and pointed to a large round thing on the tray. She picked up the big red ball and looked at it. She patted its smooth sides, clean and cool as a baby's cheek. It had a deep dimple on the top from which a stem stuck out. This round thing must be a fruit. Kondima turned the ball around in her small hands. Then she noticed a sharp knife on the plate. "Should I cut it, I wonder?" She carefully put the beautiful thing back on the plate. "I will ask the nurse about it. Such a pretty thing may be to look at instead of for eating." Other strange things stood on the tray. She lifted a glass of white water. "Looks like what Teacher Dodd brought to his puppy." She drank a little. It tasted slightly sweet. A little white pan held something golden and brown. Kondima stuck her finger in it and tasted the soft stuff. Sweet, too, and something like the cream of the durian fruit, but not so good. On a large plate she found foods that she knew about, potatoes and vegetables. On another plate, a square of bright yellow rested among some strange-looking biscuits, square and porous-looking. Beginning on the familiar foods, Kondima began to eat. Before she had finished, a young nurse stopped beside her bed. "How is our little girl getting on?" she inquired with a smile. "The doctor wants you to eat everything on your tray. He wants to see you getting plump and healthy." Kondima held up the large red fruit. "What is it?" "Of course you never saw one before. That is called an apple. It is good for you to eat apples. Doctor has said that you must have one every day." "I will have another one tomorrow?" Happiness bubbled up inside of Kondima. A fine place, this hospital. "Yes, every day. Now be sure and drink your milk." And the nurse pointed to the glass of white water. After the nurse had gone, Kondima cut the red fruit in two. Small brown seeds clustered in the middle. "I wonder if they would grow in our village." She picked them out and tied them in the corner of her handkerchief. She had picked out most of the apple's core to get the seeds. Now she sliced off thin wedges of apple and ate it. The apple tasted good, but not so good as durian, but better than almost anything else that she had ever eaten. She ate it all. That afternoon a nurse came to Kondima's bed with a small white pan and a bottle in one hand, some fluffy stuff wrapped in blue paper in the other. "We are going to wash your eye with some medicine," she explained. Kondima braced herself. The medicine would hurt, she knew. But had she not come to the city for this medicine? Had she not traveled the long trail down from the mountain village to the house of children? Had she not sailed in the great ship over the valley of water just for this medicine? She did not flinch nor whimper while the nurse washed her good left eye. "So you can smile after that?" The nurse patted the smooth, dark hair tenderly. "You are a brave little girl." For weeks the nurses treated Kondima's left eye with healing medicine. The doctor discovered that she had worms and malaria. She ate medicine for these afflictions. No matter what the medicine the doctor prescribed, no matter what treatment the nurse offered, she accepted it as a benefit and a gift with such gratitude that the doctors and nurses often turned from her bed with misty eyes. Every day people came to see the little girl who had journeyed so far. Uncle and his family came often. They brought pictures and flowers and news from the Tuan's big house of children across the valley of water. One day a young intern came. He brought a big parcel. "Open it, Kondima," he insisted. She took the package in both hands, turning it over and looking at it from all sides. Then she took off all the strings, loosening each one with patient care and winding the string into a tiny ball. At last she removed the paper and folded it with graceful fingers. Then she lifted the cover. "Oh, really, truly dishes, just like at the Tuan's house." She clapped her hands for joy. She took out a tiny cup and held it in her small brown hand. She rubbed the smooth surface against her cheek. "Do you like it, little girl?" Kondima took one of the intern's hands in both of hers and looked up at him with one lighted eye. After that, whenever the young intern came to the children's ward, he brought something for Kondima. So did many of the nurses and attendants. "I declare, I'll have to use a whole locker for the child's trinkets." The nurse drew a couple of new packages from under Kondima's bed. One of the parcels had held a new doll, latest gift of the intern. The box was empty, and the beautiful doll lay snuggled in Kondima's arms, learning the soft language of the mountains, which no one else in the children's ward could talk. Kondima bent over her new baby. The dolly had brown eyes and black hair with smooth, rosy cheeks. "She looks like Nancy," Kondima thought. "She looks like I would like to look." She breathed out a heavy sigh. After a thoughtful silence, she spoke aloud to the dolly. "I will call you Ellen, so that I will always remember." At last, the day came when the nurses wheeled Kondima away to surgery. She clutched the sides of the table. "They are going to take out my bad eye," she said to herself. "It will hurt, but this hurt is what I came for. How much better my face will look with the horrible eye gone." She saw a white something above her face and smelled a peculiar smell. Then all things faded from her mind. Later, when Kondima awoke in her own bed, she could see nothing at all. Had the white doctor taken out both of her eyes? She tried to lift her head. "Lie still, little girl." Her favorite nurse spoke close to her ear. "You are all right now. There is a bandage over both of your eyes, and you will not be able to see for a few days, but you will have a nice time. Here is your dolly. You may talk to her." Kondima lay for a long time with little Ellen in her arms. Slowly the great drowsiness passed away. The little girl of the long ago had come to life again in her arms, the same little girl whose pretty face the cruel stone had ruined. Now she was all well and beautiful. She would live with Kondima always, and never be sad or hurt or lonely any more. "When we go home," she whispered, "you will have to ride up the mountain in the bohangan, but you won't mind that. I will walk right beside you, and you will hear my voice talking all the time." She shifted the doll to the other arm. "You will see Mother and Father and Chaya and Mookit and baby Bonnie and all the village people, and you will see my other baby who is waiting for us there. I will wash your clothes myself and keep you clean, just like the nurses in this house of sickness, and you will sleep with me every night." Those who passed by the bed of the little girl with a bandage over both eyes remarked that they never heard her cry. They had never heard her complain, and the child from the Borneo mountains wore the sweetest smile in the hospital. On the day when the doctor came to remove the bandages, half the staff stood by. The sandy-haired surgeon declared that he had been forced to elbow his way clear in front from the street to attend to his now famous patient. The ruined eye had been removed. The other eye looked straight into the kind doctor's face. "Now, Kondima," he turned her face away from the light, "your eye is as bright and twinkling as a star. The infection is all cured. In a few days, we will fit you with a new glass eye that will look so much like your own that you won't be able to tell the difference." When the doctor had gone, Kondima reached up an inquiring hand. Sure enough, the bad eye was gone. The lid drooped over an empty socket. With a sigh of content, she snuggled Ellen in her arms and slept. In the morning she tried to remember what the doctor had said, but she understood only a few words of the language of these white people. She did not understand that she would have a new eye, enough that the old ruined eye had been taken away. A closed eye wouldn't look too bad. At least it wouldn't frighten people who looked at it. Deep thankfulness filled her heart. How good and kind everyone at the hospital had been. She could only smile her grateful thanks and affection on them all. The nurse had kept Kondima's traveling case under her bed. She had worn some of her little dresses on the great ship, but Auntie, the new auntie, had washed and ironed them and packed them again in the traveling case, so that all would be ready when Kondima should be permitted to leave the hospital. "How about these pretty pajamas?" The nurse held them up. "Would you like to wear them to call on the doctor?" Kondima sat up instantly. She took off the hospital gown and slipped into the rosebud pajamas. The nurse took her hand and led her down the long ward to the far end, and then down some steps to a big door. The door opened into a pleasant room, and beyond it, the sandy-haired doctor waited in his office. "Just sit here." He lifted Kondima to a tall stool. He turned her face up towards his and studied it for a long time. Then he took a small box and set it on the table. The box contained a number of glass balls. As he looked at them, he hummed a funny little tune. He picked up one ball and held it close to Kondima's good eye, then laid it back in the box and picked up another. He did this several times. "Look, nurse," he finally said, "this is perfect." He dipped the glass ball in some fluid, lifted the lid where the bad eye had been, and plopped the glass eye in. "There now, little one." He stood off smiling and rubbing his hands together with satisfaction. "What a pretty child you are." The nurse stepped into a large outer room and came back with a mirror. Kondima looked in the glass. Could that little girl really be herself? A pretty child with 2 clear brown eyes looked back at her. She clapped her hands. "Is it me? It can't be." Nurse and doctor laughed and looked happy as though some rare and wonderful joy had come to them. Kondima wanted to say many things, but the words died on her lips. She could never make the doctor understand. She took his hand in both of hers and laid it against her cheek. "What kind people," she said to herself. "Even in this house of sickness, the kindness of people makes it beautiful."